Welcome to the Consulting Leaders Podcast, where we talk about the business of consulting. Whether you're looking to grow your practice or learn from the stories of leaders in consulting, you're in the right place. I'm your host, Guillaume Jouvencel, ex-PwC and co-founder of GHA Marketing. Join me as I interview the best consultants in their niche. Let's get on with the show. Leslie, welcome to Consulting Leaders. Happy to have you.
Good morning. Thanks so much for having me too.
It is a pleasure. Let's jump straight into it.
Please.
What drew you into the fantastic world of strategic leadership and consulting?
I'm not a natural entrepreneur. I had to be dragged into it. And I think that we don't talk enough about those stories. You know, some people are like, when I hear stories of consultants or entrepreneurship, it's like, oh, I had to leap. I was leaping, I was doing it. And I was kind of someone who was doing a lot of things and not being paid. Very typical for many women as well in different sectors. And people were like, can I work with you? How can I work with you? And I didn't have a plan. And people in my world were saying, there's like a great opportunity here. You should be connecting. You should think about setting up a consultancy. You should think about setting up a practice for kind of what you're doing. And at the time, I was just like, what? No, I mean, I'm a worker bee in the sector. You know, I'm not that person. And also, I was working a lot with kind of undervalued, underrepresented groups and doing things like interview preparation and bringing them to, you know, trying to show ways and paths to promotion. And I was just like, I'm happy for that to be volunteer. But what happened was then, you know, people were then being promoted and saying, we should really work again with this person. And I was like, oh, I have no channel to make that happen. And so fortunately, I have a lot of very entrepreneurial people around me. And they were kind of like, you could do this. And I was encouraged to consider going into business and thinking about it differently. And I have a position. I'm a director at the University of Waterloo, which is one of the leading entrepreneurial universities. And they have a wonderful program for entrepreneurs, for students, for their faculty, but also for their staff. And so I was able to kind of say, if I did this, like, what would it look like? And go feel it out with someone who is an expert and kind of start drawing up the idea of like what it would mean and how I would want to take on the idea of becoming a consultant.
So what made you take the leap?
What made me take a leap? So I think I felt confident. I'd been well advised that, you know, like this is how you would set up a business, like the technical, which it was harder. You know, a lot of people do struggle with the technical part of setting up a company, and being well advised made me go, okay, now that you've described it, I think I could do it. And then the other thing is that I was feeling bolder about who I wanted to connect with. So like, oh, like if I want to go to a bigger organization or I want to work directly with a federal agency, I really do need to have this more formal company working from. And I was also interested in kind of growing as a leader. I was working in these spaces in leadership, on senior leadership teams, and I was thinking, I have more to give, and I have more to give in more spaces. And, you know, if I formalize this and I reach out to people that, you know, I had very mild ambitions when I started. I was like, break even the first year. You know, I kept my job, all these things. I was like, very mild, break even. Don't embarrass yourself. I mean, it was very, very humble where I started from. And I always like to remind people it can be, you know, like, because, you know, I started humbly with kind of saying, okay, let's see where I can start from. And I learned as I went, and I designed my own website and I designed my own stuff, and it wasn't perfect, but I you know, you can start with you and build. And I think that was something that I did over that first year, and I learned a lot, and I found that I liked the learning, and I really loved working with clients. Like that direct seeing impact through consulting was exciting to me, and it kind of gave me the bug to keep going.
That you're solving now. So you've taken the leap. You've been doing this for a while now. What problem do you solve, and with what outcome?
So I'm a social psychologist, and I've always been incredibly fascinated by how people come together to take decisions, move things forward. Where do we get stuck has always been really interested to me. So how do other people know you need help, right? So how do you know something needs to change or that help needs to happen? Or, and then adding in the idea that I was kind of working in really large institutions and organizations where you were seeing really great ideas kind of work their way up and then fizzle, get made more moderate, get made less innovative, or just go up in kind of what I call the swirl, the leadership swirl. They go up to the top and they kind of get passed around the leadership team, and times keeps passing. But these are really often very good ideas. They're really interesting things. But leadership don't necessarily know they have time to deal with them, or that they want to deal with them, or they're uncomfortable with the topic. Maybe it's innovative or different or not something they're really, educated or keen to talk about. And especially because I was working in the inclusion space, it was really common for these really great ideas, really evidence-based ideas to go up and just kind of swirl. And I started talking about the swirl. I started talking about, you know, you're missing out on opportunity because you're not talking to each other in the leadership spaces in ways that would get a decision forward in a more effective, faster, thoughtful way. What should I call that? What does that look like? And I started calling that strategic inclusive leadership. So the strategic idea being that you're going to take decisions that cause change. The idea that you have a strategy. You wouldn't need a strategy if you weren't trying to go somewhere new. And we all want to go somewhere new. We want to grow, or we want to make more money, or we want to expand, or whatever that looks like, change things for people. And inclusive being the idea that we want to think about the people that this is on the other end of, or how this is going to affect the people around us. It's a really broad sense of the word inclusive. But bringing those two things together and then saying, it's totally normal to be uncomfortable talking about that, but also that we can, and we can build skills around it. And I started working with leadership teams to do that. Particularly, like a big catalytic moment for me was when I worked with a leadership team that was about to launch a strategy, and all of them weren't sure how to talk about it. And it was like, okay, well, then let's go work on that together. And I started working with leadership teams about basically having far better decision making, and then that actually really fosters better collegial relationships because they trust each other to make those decisions and make them together. And I think that became kind of a moment where I realized, like, this is so impactful, and people get helped, and we get better policy and programming and decisions. And I think for me, I was really interested in changing the narrative about the idea that the only thing we should talk about is profit, or the only thing we should talk about is the money. And I was like, you know what, if you talk about things a little bit more broadly, that is a really great form of leadership. And like, I'm going to talk about that form of leadership so that you can hook into something and maybe help define your leadership a little differently.
So you don't know what you don't know, right? Mm-hmm. And in what you're describing, so I clearly see the value, but I feel it's not obvious, right? You probably have to deal with leaders who don't know what they don't know about how they could make better, faster decisions. It's just like the KPIs are agreed upon at the beginning of the year. We know what we have to do. Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4, we look like this. We just need to, do that. How do you, and we're not even talking about marketing yet, but how do you approach the fact that you need to educate your audience even before you start marketing your solution? Mm-hmm. Like, how does that message come through? Like, hey, you can make better decisions if ABC was true. Let me show you how you can even consider the fact that ABC needs to be true.
Oh, this is such a good question, because actually, even rooms I enter, let's say there's 8 senior leaders around a table, 4 of them are probably there and don't want to be, because they're like, I'm not sure I'm here, but we've decided to hire this person. And right. So that's just a reality of the type of work I'm doing, because they don't know what they don't know, and they haven't thought about it this way. Inevitably, the way I've entered so far, and part of it is this, I'm doing things like this to start talking about this as a different way of thinking about leadership and how people come together. But also, usually it's a champion. It's a person who've heard me present a case study, or heard me present, change making that happened, or they said, oh my gosh, like, I'm actually enjoying my job again because we came in and our leadership team is treating each other better, and we're taking better decisions, and we feel effective. And someone says you should bring her in. I usually get championed into the space, and then I come into the space with at least half the people going, why are you here? And I have to kind of take that opportunity every time to like lead from that place and say, you're gonna have to trust me that at the end there's value. And what's been really great so far is, as long as, even if they have to be told to be there, the thing is, at the end of it, they tend to go, okay, I think that's really gonna help us. And I keep coming back to that. So it has been very much a word of mouth sort of approach where I get championed into a space. But that's only growing, because the idea that people are stressed and burnt out, or are struggling to take all their meetings and things like that, in our leadership teams. Or I would also say to speak frankly, to feel that they can put ideas on the table, to not rely on old habits or old patterns of, oh gosh, so and so is just difficult to work with. And I ask them to drop all that so that we can get to a better decision making place. And sometimes that reset is incredibly valuable to an organization, and they kind of all go, actually, that was helpful to us.
Who is that champion usually?
The person who wants the strategy or the thing they're launching to succeed.
But so how do you put a role on that? Because I guess it's gonna vary then.
It's always going to vary. That's the thing about what I'm finding challenging. And I know we've talked about like what will come, but like one of the big challenges of the way I do business is that they kind of have to know I'm there, because I can't really target marketing. That's one of the things that's challenging, right? I have to kind of run into people in the space and kind of say, did you know this is something that could really help you advance?
By the way,
I do this, or by the way, I help advance that. And that's actually one of the biggest challenges I have, because there isn't, maybe you could reach out to the head of strategy or something like that and then say, like, this is sort of the work I do to help things land. That isn't even actually often the same person in most places, or the person who's most invested in stuff getting through, right? That's the person leading some charges. So I would say the hard part, or a really challenging part of this, is who do you talk to show what this can do? And the other time I've been brought in, and I do think this helps, is if there's a change in leadership. So we're getting a new president, we're getting a new VP, and sometimes that's an open opportunity.
That would make a lot of sense. So who is it that you target specifically, Leslie? You mentioned like bigger institutions. So I understand who we are trying to get in front of, a champion who is maybe a bit more sensible to the fact that decisions needs to be made faster and better. And for this, we need to have more trust between each other. And like, there's a bit of delegation in this as well. Not delegation as in downwards delegation, but more like lateral delegation, I imagine. So who do you typically target in the sense of like companies, industries? Do you have a specific industry that you do that within?
Yeah. So most of my work has been in public sector, especially launching like big, they've done a huge engagement. They're trying to launch a strategy. They're trying to get buy-in. That's happened. I've also done it though in companies where they're remote global. And so it's like, how do we set norms, and how do we know how to communicate with each other when it's remote? And those are kind of two places. And those are big shifts, of course, going on in many sectors. And right now I'm doing a lot of work in higher education. So, universities in general have a lot of faculty leadership, and they haven't been brought up through the same leadership channels and the same leadership development that, say, other like corporate and public sector have big leadership, streams. Faculty don't tend to have come through that. They tend to be great and successful faculty members, and they get up and they have to do a lot of consensus decision making, and they kind of go, it's harder than they thought.
It's so funny that it would be more public institutions and governmental organizations that see this as important and want to implement it faster, when you think that usually the fastest to innovate are the private organizations. So it's interesting to see that when it comes to leadership and making sure I'm going to say it, treat your people right and people around you right, public sectors are a bit ahead of the curve, at least on that specific category, which is interesting.
Yeah.
So let's get into one of the things you've hinted on already. How do those champions, those large institutions, those governmental organizations typically find you? Like, what has worked for you to attract potential clients?
So I think I had a lot of misconceptions about this when I started. Like, I really thought that I would like put a website together and I'd write a great blurb that explained what I did. And that held almost no value initially, other than credibility.
Nice.
People could find me in the sense of like, they could look me up once they connected with me, but the actual skill they need to connect with me first needed to happen. And so I think I really thought that I would put, marketing or advertising out there, and then it would be like, oh, that will work out. And actually that wasn't the best way to meet people. People needed to engage with me and what I was doing. So I designed a workshop on strategic inclusive leadership and how to connect between the individual and the institutional strategy, and how to teach kind of every person in your organization should have a sense and connection to your strategy. And I actually started teaching that. And I've taught it a few times at a few conferences. A lot of conferences have workshop days prior. And I started dropping into that. And then people there were like, we need that. Like, we are not connected to our strategy. We don't have enough connection with our staff. And I started meeting people who happen to be the delegate at that conference, going back to their organization and becoming that champion for me. And they would even say I didn't do that well at the beginning. And I always try to make it really real when I talk about like consulting, because coming in and thinking it's just going to click, it doesn't for everybody, and it does take time. And for me, like when I first started, I would maybe take a card and be like, oh yeah, like I'd love to connect with you. Here's a card. And I was really, meek, and I'm not a naturally meek person, but I was just, confident. And by the time I got to kind of this past year, it was like I had information, summaries, here's how to reach me, bookmarks that I gave out because of the type of conference I was at, that was really appropriate. And I, was really like, or would you like me to contact you? I'd love to follow up and like, let's meet. And I started kind of working those spaces better. So people met me and and if they could connect with me and they learned something, they were a lot more likely to champion something into their organization.
So I'd like to dig into this. What are you actively doing to get those people to meet with you? Because I think that's every B2B coach and consultant's dream, right? People coming to you being like, hey, here is my credit card details. I'd like to work with you, right? So like, come in and help us out. So although obviously that doesn't happen, I mean, I think easily 85% of the B2B coaches and consultants that I talk to only rely on referral, which is, I mean, in my opinion, not the best thing, but it is a thing. So I like what you just said here. Like, you make sure that people come and meet me. What do you do to make this happen? Like, tactically, can you walk us through that?
I love this question because actually I think it is the tactical that we don't talk about enough.
Right.
So again, because I'm a social psychologist, I'm always thinking about like, how do you make that interaction what it needs to be? And how do you, make people feel comfortable and make it easy for people to kind of hook in. And so whether I'm going to have multiple forms of information so that you can connect with the one that you can take with you. Like if you're like, I don't really want to talk to you, I just want to be able to take something quietly, I make that available. If they do want to walk up and talk to me, or because I always see that as a brave action. I think taking that attitude, if someone walks up to me after a workshop and says, I really love that, I had to get a lot braver in that conversation to say, would you like to work with me again? I'd like to connect with you again. I had to put it out there. Like I hate to say it, but like people just don't make the ask enough. And the other, and so that was one. So I had to be like, oh, would you love to, I'd love to do something at your university, or I'd love to do something at your company. And and say like, I'm able to do this virtually, in person, let's be flexible. Would you like to meet again? Or is there someone you'd like to introduce me to? I would make the ask a lot more explicit. And I think people don't do that enough, to be fair. And then the third thing was, and this is from watching other consultants, because I'd be in spaces with other coach consultants. And one of the things I really noticed is that people would subtly throw an opportunity into kind of the conversation, and the consultant would just let it walk past. And I really started watching for that. So someone would say, I loved that. And I think that would really help where I'm at. Do you have anything that's more focused on X sector? Do you have anything that's focused on, wellness that you could connect to strategy? Or, and the person would be like, oh, I don't do wellness. And I'd be like, no,
I see what you mean. This is not subtle at all. This is not subtle at all. This is literally the person asking you business.
Yeah. Or, it's so funny because the other thing I would hear is this very consultant focused conversation where they'd be like, I mean, I could do that, but what I really love to do is this. And I'm like,
so that's self-centered.
Ask them more questions, ask them what they want, try to feel that out. When I made some of those pivots and centered the client and like listened to them more, but I watched that happen over and over and over again. You're right. It's not subtle, but I've even, because I'm in an institution and I have to hire consultants from the position I'm in. So I also see it from the side. I have repeatedly said to people like, oh, that's really close to what we're looking for next year in blank and blank. And the person's like, oh, gosh, what I really want to do is this more. And I'm like, but you just told me you have no clients. Like, come on, I'm trying to network you into maybe a position or something I'm trying to offer you. And I just saw that
Yeah.
happening a lot. And then it made me think like, well, where am I doing that? Where am I doing that? Like, where am I limiting what I could be doing or not thinking through? Like the
Mhm.
one of the big keys that really helped me was I read a book and went to a session. The book's called The Shortlist, and they talked about how many touches it takes to get a client. And the average for coaches and consultants is 14. And I had been thinking one or two, right? If they meet me and they like me, we're gonna click. And it was like, no, we need to bump into each other at that conference. You need to approach me. I need to, maybe you take that slip. Maybe I say, hey, can I take your email and reach out to you? And next thing you know, I'm 6, 7 touches in with that client. And if they're coming up, even if it's not perfect what I do, or maybe it's really not at all what I do, still talk to them, find out what they're looking for, see if you can refer, build that relationship. I find so much of that is lost. And I'm usually amazed in the space once I started listening to it, how many times it seemed like offers were actually coming people's way and they were just kind of going, whoop, and letting them slip past. And I was like, okay, I want to make sure I'm not doing that. And that we're having a discussion about playing to my strengths, of course, because I want to bring my best, but also what do you need? And being really open to that discussion repeatedly if need be.
I love this because you've already alluded to the kind of next question, which is how do you put the sales in motion and make it cross the finish line? So I like that a lot. How do you do your business case at the end of the day, Leslie? Because that's what before hiring a B2B coach or consultant, this is what a lot of procurement department and whoever the decision makers are
Mhm.
going to end up doing, right? They're going to ask for a business plan. Like, how does that impact bottom line? Um, how do you do that with your very specific niche, which is helping people make better and faster decisions?
Yeah, great question. I don't come in with the business case for them. And I think that's really important. They know their business. And I think that helps. Like, so I'm a trained coach as well. And I think understanding that like don't cross into their expertise. So I actually take this I think this through a lot. I tell them what I know, the case studies, and I let them filter through how would this help our business. Because everyone knows what this is like. You get advice and you can feel it not land because the person is assuming too much about the business or the case. And like you can think about even in your life, someone says, oh, well, you should have done that. And you're kind of going, I don't have that. I don't have, and it happens all the time. So what I find is it's far better not to make a perfect or defined business case, but to talk about what you know gets achieved and then kind of ask them questions like, do you have any questions about how that would impact your leadership circle? Or do you have any questions about, how would you think that would change business for you? Would faster decisions help you? Yes. Why? Listen to them. It also then makes the sessions and the things you do so much more effective because right from the beginning, you're hearing what they're looking for from it. And so what I would say is there are times and I'm sure this is exactly it, right? Other consultants would say, actually, I'm really able to show that most businesses get like 18% better or better profit. I'm not that kind of consultant. I have to put forward this idea that these skills are worth investing in. And when you invest in them, this is the sort of stuff people have reported back to me. How do you think that would apply to your business? And, would you like to give that a try? And generally what happens is that leaves them to do the thinking about what they want in their goals. And then we talk about it. And it's kind of a more collaborative approach to like goals in the end. And also it gives me a lot of insight into what they're looking for from the business case for it too.
So at the end of the day, I think that's more towards the consulting side of things than B2B coaching, but building the business case together with your clients
Yeah.
is just a very good way to go about it. I like what you said about okay, this is typically going to impact 18% your profit whatsoever. This is something tricky for B2B coaches and consultants because each and every client is going to be that different. So you need to use the disclaimer of like, hey, those are exceptional results that are not guarantee of success for you whatsoever. So I like hey, let's focus on you and see what could make sense for you and like, let's build it together. As long as you have the initial trust and attention from the person in the first place, that is something that should at least bring a conversation, potentially a deal.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a bit curious to ask you, Leslie, since you're a social psychologist as well. So right now you rely on this like networking, those referrals, those discussions that you start and spark at networking events and other in-person events. But as a social psychologist, what would you, if you were to ramp up a marketing channel, right, to acquire, I mean, to establish another acquisition channel and then just
Mhm.
referrals, what would it be? Is that something that you've thought at all? Or if yes, like what were you considering that you know could work because you have that social psychologist background?
Oh, yeah. I think about this a lot because if I wanted to go do, I have a full-time job and I love what
Yeah.
I do. But if I wanted to pivot and do this full-time, I'd have to think about where this is coming from. And referrals are great, but they're sporadic. And so, one of
Amen.
the big things I'm leaning towards is exactly what we're doing here, which is starting to build the idea of how do I become a knowledge leader in the space.
Yeah.
And the reality is like I'm really big on designing your own understanding of your own leadership, playing
Mhm.
to your strengths, thinking about who you want to be as a leader, being thoughtful. I demonstrate a way which is strategic inclusive leadership because I find it incredibly effective. And
Mhm.
what I'm learning though is that if no one ever hears that, they're not going to connect to it. And so, I actually have been pursuing kind of mentorship from some people who have made the leap through a TED Talk or into the LinkedIn spaces or into different places where they're doing some leadership, like knowledge leadership. And I think for me, if that's the next step, that's where I need to go to because people don't just connect with your product, they need to connect with you. And if they don't have access to hearing how you talk about something or access how you do you seem like the feedback I get is you seem reasonable, you seem pragmatic, you seem interested in our success, you seem I'm really direct, right? So I don't just talk about like, oh, your leadership decisions aren't going that well. I talk about things like, is it a pain point that 4 people on your leadership team don't like talking to each other? And generally they're like, yep, that's a horrible pain point for me. And no one wants to talk about that, but like once the external person's brought it forward, now we're talking in this really pragmatic way. I get that feedback. And I work with a lot of people to develop their strategic skills so that they can promote. And I'm really interested in that. Do you have people who you'd love to promote, but they just don't have that yet? And so I think moving to a knowledge leadership space where I'd start talking about leadership. And frankly, I'm really interested in hearing more diverse voices of leadership and different ways people have conceptualized it. I think that's the space I go to so that people who haven't run into me at a conference or aren't getting referred through a friend are able to go, Leslie has a lot of really interesting things to say about leadership, or wow, I think I might, be able to advance myself or my company through what she's talking about. They need a chance to connect with you. And I think that's where I would head to is designing a bit of a knowledge leadership, knowledge mobilization discussion about this space.
Amen to that. Not much to add. That was great. How do
We're starting
you?
today.
Yeah, no, that's. I mean, sometimes I like to add stuff and chip in, and I'm like, no, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Um, how do you? So once you start working with the clients,
Hmm.
you help their leaders communicate, trust, like build better rapport between each other. And once you're done, this is it, right? It's okay. They are now making better and faster decision. Or how do you farm? Meaning once you've hunted the right way because people came to you, the champion like brought you in, like made you and the team signed the contract, you deliver, and then what? How do you double down on existing relationships? How do you make sure that you can keep on bringing value, obviously, to your clients, but then also keep on charging them, which is where a lot of money is in B2B coaching and consulting. Do
Yeah.
you actively think and implement on that, or how do you do that?
Well, in two ways. One, I design packages. So I don't
Mhm.
just do and teach the skills. This is not the sort of thing that you do one time.
Yeah,
That's like saying, oh, you
interesting.
had a good conversation with your partner. You're going to have a great marriage. No, it's going to be over and over and over again. And yeah, and we're going to work at it and we're going to have stumbles. And
Yeah.
so what I would say is like this idea that social and decision making and leadership skills are like a one and done. No, it's the
Mhm.
whole journey. And so I try to always remind people that we're going to reset, but then the reset is about the next build. It's not about it's not about just one day, it's about the rest. And
Yeah.
so I tend to package things as we have that reset date and then we have a series of coaching one-on-one, because also people have their own dynamics in their work or in what they're worried about or their own leadership, and privacy and safe places to talk very important. And so I pivot into that. So I tend to bundle things together into group things and individual one-on-one things. And then I would say additionally, it's okay. And I think we need to keep saying, I want to say this over and over and over again, because like this is my business, but also I think it's important we say this. It's okay to recognize that you might need a facilitated conversation or a facilitated debate or an innovative push conversation or week or whatever that looks like, and bring someone in to do that. And so I try to remind my clients, like, this is not a one and done. You now have a relationship with me, so that when there's a hard conversation, a crisis, a concern, or even just a tune-up every year at your retreat, I'd love to come facilitate that with, and I know your people. And so I think building out the relationship to kind of say like the idea that all of this is a one and done and people go, oh, check, I'm just a great decision maker now. If you ask that about anyone's personal life, they'd be like, oh God, no. I mean, I'm don't they call it school of hard knocks, street smarts, live and learn, trial and error. I mean, we have all these phrases because that's life, and that's still life for organizations and companies as well. So I try to kind of pivot that to say, once you have an open door relationship with me, bring me into anything you need support with. I really like a dirty, difficult problem, and you don't, which means we should get together and we should both dig into it and kind of hopefully enjoy the process and get through it faster.
The more you learn, the more you realize that there is much to learn. So usually when people start becoming aware that they were not doing something right and they start doing it right, they're like, oh, there is still so much way to go.
Yeah.
We've already kind of tackled this, Leslie, but I'm interested into getting into that a bit deeper. So you mentioned a bit earlier what was challenging, right, for you, which was the finding the right person who's going to champion you within the company. Apart from that, in your consulting practice, because I understand you also have the full-time job, where would you say the biggest challenge is, and how are you thinking about solving it to really take this to the next level, if that's the goal at all, right? Because sometimes it isn't. Like, how do you think about this, and what would be the challenge that you're trying to solve that right now?
Yeah, in terms of the business, I would say that building confidence was the initial really difficult challenge, to kind of go, am I going to have clients? You know, what is this going to look like? And learning how I like to do business, right? I'm not just being thoughtful about my leadership, but being thoughtful about how I want to do business, because I didn't want to grow in the wrong direction. And lots of people will tell you how to run a business, but I think you can run your business however you want. And I was like, let's empower ourselves, right? And so I wanted time to think about that. And so my business also grew faster than I expected, in the sense that I was still working full time. And I was like, wow, okay, this is going to push me time-wise, resource-wise. What am I going to do? So the biggest challenge I have now is, because I'm a senior leader in another organization, how would I replace that salary or know when I'm ready to take the leap to doing this full time? When would I know that feels safe or right for me? And I think one of the things I'm constantly thinking about is like, how could this be patient? Be patient and but also diversify. So for example, like if you're, maybe there's other things you want to, I love teaching. So like maybe there's workshops I'd like to produce, or modules I want to make, or things I want to do. So diversify what I'm doing so that leap doesn't feel so big. And that's going to take some time, but I think that will make it better for me and make it so that I can expand the business even more. I would also say that I've had to invest a bit in tech, and I'm sure you have too. You have to invest in the technology you need to make these things high quality and connected and make your life work. And I don't just mean like, oh, I got a Calendly. That didn't work for me. So trial and error. I mean things like, I need my multiple calendars to all talk to each other so that I know what my days look like. And for me, that was tough. It took a long time to integrate. So I would say at the moment, scaling is a challenge, because but also in the leadership space, I think having leadership experience in doing what I'm doing now is also incredibly valuable. I need to bring that credibility to the table that I work in the leadership space still, and I'd like to do some years in that. So the current challenge is balancing those two priorities, because I think learning more about leadership is still really serving me. And so if anything, I think as I've figured out who I want to be as a leader and as a consultant, it's about now saying, when are you going to be ready to go bigger?
Yes, that's the question that each and every entrepreneur is asking themselves every time.
Yeah. And enjoying entrepreneurship, right? Like, I think I've grown as an entrepreneur and being excited about that. And like, taking up an opportunity like this, or taking up an opportunity to go talk to the women in entrepreneurship group in my city. And those things have started to make me feel and have that identity as an entrepreneur. And that took time, but that's now making me much bolder. And I think connecting with other entrepreneurs can also be really helpful for you to do that. And I would recommend that. Not just consultants, but all kinds, to get that mindset.
I think entrepreneurship is, if you're ready to face your ego, let's say, is the best path to fast self-development. Like the market doesn't care. Like the market is going to treat you as ruthlessly and I mean straightforwardly as one could be.
Mhm.
Your friends, family, they always going to be here to like encourage you, which is important, right? But market is brutal, and it's like when you're an entrepreneur, you don't have a choice. If you want to grow and like grow your company, you have to face reality constantly, which is a bit stressful sometimes. But this is why it's such a good path to.
That's such a good definition of entrepreneurship. It just doesn't lie.
Right, right.
You have to go live in the facts to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah,
And that's been both liberating and a little scary.
agreed. Leslie Cove, ladies and gentlemen. Leslie, if people want to find out more about you and what you do, where should they go?
Awesome. My company is called Wild Rose House. Wild Rose, because the flower of my province. House, because I wanted to create an intentional meeting space. So Wild Rose House is my company. You can reach out to me there or on LinkedIn, Leslie Cove. And yeah, I'm very open-minded about what collaboration can look like, as you probably can tell. So I'd be really pleased to hear from absolutely anybody.
We'll put all the links in the description. And what I can say for sure is that you've gained at least one new connection on LinkedIn out of this interview. Me, I just added you, Leslie. Leslie, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. This was great. Thank you so much, Guillaume.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Consulting Leaders Podcast. We hope you learned valuable lessons on how to grow your practice and take your business to the next level. Make sure to subscribe and leave us a review wherever you're listening to this show so you never miss an episode. To apply and be a guest on the show, click the link in the description. See you next time. How was